Okay. Welcome to the Planning Committee, and before I start I have to read out a script to remind members of the public and the public at home that this Planning Committee and everyone present, that this meeting will be broadcast live via the internet and the record is archived for future viewing. So that's my normal standard message, but cameras are alive in the council chamber, so people should be aware of that. Before I start, can I say that recently and very suddenly we lost a member of this council, Councillor Keith Geary, who was a well-respected member of Lantwick First Group and a personal friend to many of us. It's a sad loss that we've lost him at such a young age, and I'd like to ask members to be standing for 1 minute while we remember him and his family. Thank you for that. Okay, looking round the room, I think we've got every single member of the Planning Committee, 21 members present. Unless I'll stand corrected if I've missed anybody, but any apologies, please?
No apologies received, Chair.
Oh, thank you for that. We've got the minutes of the last meeting in the agenda. To remind people at home, this agenda is a rather thick document. We've had the agenda for over a week and many members will have read through it. It's not that we're rushing through it. We've read the document and we're happy with it, and we'll carry on the business as we normally do with speed and efficiency. Can I say that the minutes to me look perfectly accurate? Can somebody endorse them as a true record?
I'll second them.
Right, I've got a number there. I saw Councillor Val Hartree with her hand in the air, and I know you, Vice Chair, have seconded it. Is every member happy? Please show. Okay, any against? No, that's clearly carried, so thank you for that. The council has to, or councillors have to now give their declarations of interest under the council's code of conduct, and I know that Councillor Parker wants to. Are there any others? No, just Councillor Parker. Would you like to tell us what those are?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two of the applications coming before you tonight are submitted by me. That's 2012/01095 development at Lee Sweeney Garage, and 2013/0109 at Llanech Vineyard. I will withdraw from the council chamber while you consider these two applications.
Right, thank you for that. So when we get down to them, I know Councillor Parker will leave the council chamber. There is a reference here under agenda item 4. It's to do with public speaking at planning committees. As we've all been suitably trained this afternoon, we all know, and the members in the public gallery should know, from today or from the 1st of February, people will be allowed to speak at the planning committee. There is a time limit of 6 minutes, but that will be explained to you on the council website, and you can apply to speak at future planning committees. Is there anything else you want to add as the legal officer?
No, at this stage.
No? Anything to add to that, Marcus, from the planning officer? No, thank you.
Are you going to go through the report in terms of the notification?
Yeah,
Do you want me to go through the
yeah.
report?
I'm going to ask the legal officer to go through the report, which has been left on your desks. Would you like to read out what the report says?
Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman has correctly said, there was some training given by the monitoring officer to many members of the committee prior to committee today, and as a result, a number of issues were raised for potentially for further clarification. Subject to debate, I just wanted to introduce a note that that has been handed out to be attached to the referral. And what that note refers to is certain amendments in relation to the public speaking proposals for public speaking, which have already been approved, as members will recall, at council meeting on the 17th of December. Very briefly, to go through the proposed amendments, in the note it suggests that at item little 1, in terms of the notification to speak, it's proposed to allow members of the public an extra day to register themselves to speak at the forthcoming planning committee. It was felt that the previous deadline, which was 3 clear working days prior to committee, would not allow those wishing to register a fair chance to be notified that the application they were interested in would be on the next planning committee and give them the opportunity to speak. So it's been suggested that rather than having to register 3 clear working days prior to committee, that's brought forward to allow them an extra day, so that would be changed to 2 clear working days prior to committee. So for a committee, as is usually the case on a Thursday, that would enable them to register by 5 p.m. on the Tuesday before committee. Secondly, officers have considered that it would be helpful for some signposting to be in the guidance in relation to what matters are relevant for members as members of planning committee to consider as being material considerations for their determination or consideration of each application. So there is a list of matters which are considered to be material in the proposed code of conduct. So it's proposed again as a minor amendment to the public speaking guide to signpost those with the additional paragraph which is set out in paragraph small 2 under matters considered relevant, and that will then have a web link inserted which will then take the public or those wishing to speak to the actual part of the conduct, the code of conduct. So those are the 2 minor amendments to the proposed public speaking, and again I would remind members that the public speaking elements of the code have been passed by council, so will be coming in on the 1st of February, but it's asked, and I think perhaps helpfully there is a draft recommendation subject to members' consideration and debate set out at the bottom of page 1 in relation to the guide. First of all, that the guide to public speaking planning committee include the amendments tabled at this meeting be endorsed, and that's what I've just gone through now. Again, subject to members' views and debate after I've finished. In relation to the code of conduct itself, given some of the issues that were raised in the training that took place beforehand, if members are minded to defer consideration of the code of conduct pending clarification, then that could be done, subject to clarification that doesn't alter the position in relation to the guide to public speaking, which will obviously need to come in on the 1st of February to enable public speaking to come in at the next planning committee.
Okay, so that's the legal advice from our council lawyer, that we ought to, the guide to public speaking at planning committee, we endorse that can come in on the 1st of February as programmed, but we defer the second part, the code of conduct for members and officers dealing with planning matters. If anybody wants to speak, or yes, Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I first of all agree with this, that we pass it so it can come into operation for the first meeting following the 1st of February,
Yeah.
but also that we defer on the code of conduct because of various issues that I won't go into now that came up in that planning session. Can I also take the opportunity to say something about the actual speaking rights as set out in the supplementary information, which I think is most helpful and also has improved the situation over what was first being minded to agree in terms of times and dates for applying and everything like that. On the actual part that gives allocation of speaking times at the meeting, this is going to be up to you, Chairman, to carry out and to sort of stringently run. I'm sure you'll do a good job on that. But can I just ask you to be mindful of something that came up in a council in England a couple of years ago when it first came in, speaking rights into that council. What happened quite simply was a cynical, tactical response by some developers in that area, where they literally put up a number of speakers to speak against their own proposal, to literally eat into the opposition's time and try and skew the debate. Now, I'm not saying there's cynical people in the Vale of Glamorgan, but if you're hearing a speaker speaking against something who either seems to be speaking for it or not saying very much at all, you may be minded perhaps to reallocate time, perhaps, if you're not happy with the way it's going, and that's up to you. But beware, people are very tactical sometimes. Can I just say, though, that in endorsing what we've got here in front of us, I'm glad some 5.5 years after I first tried to get this into the council, it's actually here at last. I like to think that people addressing us, both for or against any application, will actually aid us as a committee and add some local knowledge or thoughts or views that may not have been considered or may not be considered as fully as they would like within the paperwork, and will aid us in our decisions. So I'm happy with that, and I'm delighted, of course, that we will have the opportunity to review it within 12 months, because everything new needs to be given time to run its course and bed in and then be reviewed. And I'm sure if we learn any lessons in the meantime, we'll pick that up and improve it if necessary. So I so move, Chairman.
So you're moving. Have you got a seconder? Councillor Hatton has seconded. Right, okay.
Just run through the motion, though, because we'll amend the motion.
Yeah, the legal officer wants to run through this motion because he wants to amend the motion.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the sake of clarity, I understand Councillor Hodges is wishing to defer consideration of the Code of Conduct. Yeah. So, in terms of the proposed recommendation that's set out in the note that's been prepared, the motion would be the same in relation to number 1. Recommendation number 1 still stands. In relation to recommendation number 2, I would suggest the following wording, subject to members' consideration. So number 2 would be that consideration of the Code of Conduct for members and officers dealing with planning matters, save in respect of the guide to public speaking at planning committee, be deferred pending further clarification by officers in respect of certain procedural matters.
Members happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm
we've got a
getting
mover and
a-
seconder again for that.
yeah. Councillor Hodges has agreed to that motion being added. Councillor Hatton. Yeah, and Councillor Powell, you wanted to speak? Yeah, right. I think we'd already got that. I'm taking it that everybody is in agreement with that, but I'll just take a show of hands.
In favour?
That is unanimous. So everyone is in favour. So that part will be deferred, and the first part for public speaking will take place on the first meeting after the 1st of February. So thank you for that. That's that out of the way with. Going down onto agenda item 5, we've got the building regulations, applications, other building control matters determined by the director and his delegated powers. Marcus.
Nothing to add, Chair.
So there's nothing to add. Members, note the report then.
Yeah.
All happy?
Yeah.
Yes, that's carried. 6 is planning applications determined by the director and his delegated powers. Marcus.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Nothing to add. Members happy with that? Yeah, that's clearly carried. Thank you for that. 7 is trees. Anything to add under the tree list, Marcus?
Nothing to add, Chair.
No. And the delegated list under I, Marcus?
No, nothing.
No. Members happy with the agenda item 7 under trees? Nothing to add? That's clearly carried. Thank you. Under 8, enforcement action. This is the land and buildings at the Yard, 28 Station Road, which appears on page 10. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this relates to a yard which has previously been used as a builder's yard and a scaffolder's storage yard at the rear of 28 Station Road, Penarth. It was brought to our attention it had been changed to a tyre fitting yard without planning permission. The 2 previous uses fell within Class B8 of the Town and Country Planning Use Classes Order, which is general storage. Use for tyre fitting is considered to fall within Class B2, which is general industrial. And obviously, as a general industrial use, can cause considerable neighbour disturbances and obviously lead to a significant detrimental impact. This was actually through complaints that we received, the notification that this change of use had taken place. We have tried to resolve it, but there has been no attempt to move on, so we are seeking enforcement action to cease the use for B2 general industrial use at the premises, and for the persons who are operating it to leave the premises.
Right, what we're being asked to do then, that the head of legal services be authorised to serve an enforcement notice under section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended to require the cessation of the use of the premises for the purposes of tyre fitting, a use falling within the use of Class B2 of the Town and Country Planning Use Classes Order 1987 has been amended, and the removal of all machinery and equipment associated with the unauthorised use. Yeah, and in the event of the non-compliance with this notice, authorisation is also sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. So that's what we'll be voting on. I understand Gwyn Roberts wants to speak. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to know is what attempts the people have made to seek planning permission, whether formally, informally, and some sort of background as what's happened. Marcus mentioned we've made some attempts, but I think I'd like to be more explicit on what attempts to resolve the situation without reaching this stage are.
Okay.
There's been no planning application submitted, and they basically have ignored us. So they've made no attempt to try and comply with the council's request. It is relevant that if they had submitted a planning application, our colleagues in environmental health could have been consulted, and we may have been able to condition and tie the use down to specifics. We can't do that through the enforcement procedure, so the only thing we can require them to do through enforcement is to cease using the premises. That being said, that might encourage them to actually make a planning application and allow us to properly consider it.
Okay. Councillor Bird.
Move the action, Chair.
Have you got a seconder? Yes. Oh, Councillor Nick Hodges will second it. All members minded to follow that recommendations I read out? That is clearly carried. Thank you. Was there anybody against? I didn't see anybody. I just said it was clearly carried. That means that everybody voted unanimously for it. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 9 is the general planning matters. Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a consultation or a report dealing with a consultation from Welsh Government on 4 separate issues related to the forthcoming planning bill. I don't intend running through each of these documents in detail because they are quite weighty. I'll try and pick out some of the salient points as we go through them. I would point out, and I did circulate to all councillors, Councillor Drysdale's very interesting and welcomed response to some of those consultations, and I can assure him that those comments have been inserted into the documents in addition to what is before you now. Basically, this is Welsh Government's attempt to speed the planning process up. That is where they're coming from. The first part of the consultation relates to the removal, basically, of the design and access statement from the planning system. So currently, developers have to complete a design and access statement when they're submitting an application, which explains how they've come to the form of development that they are promoting, essentially, how it fits in with the town and the street scene around it, how it fits in with the conservation area, for example, how it fits in with other listed buildings nearby. Welsh Government have reviewed the requirement to produce this document and consider it's no longer necessary, but your officers are of the opinion that while in certain cases it isn't probably necessary for single dwellings and for extensions to dwellings and this type of development, it certainly is essential for your major developments and indeed for developments in conservation areas where the impact of what is developed, what is designed, needs to be explained from the ground up, needs to be explained from how the architect or the agent has come to the conclusion that the development they're proposing is acceptable in the first instance. So we are going back to Welsh Government saying that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, you can change the types of application that require design and access statements, but you shouldn't just get rid of the whole concept in its entirety. It does have a valuable part to play in the planning process, especially with bigger developments and developments in sensitive areas. The next consultation related to front-loading the development management system, and you may be aware that as a council we operate a pre-application process now where developers and landowners and householders indeed can write to the council and ask about proposals they have and whether or not we have any suggestions to improve those proposals, whether they're likely to be acceptable or not. Developers other than householders get that service free of charge. All other developers have to pay for the council for it. Welsh Government have seen that system in operation in a few councils, ours being one of them, and have decided they think it's a good idea and they'd like to make a uniform system right across Wales. The biggest problem we have is that the way they've attempted it is a very, very micromanagement approach. They've attempted to be very specific on certain issues. They are, we believe, going to confuse the public with the way they are intending to deal with it, because they're requiring the developers or the agents for developers to carry out a consultation process themselves with the local public before they submit a planning application. They're not setting out clearly how that will be done, how that will be policed, where plans will be made available for people to see, and we have a real fear that if it's done in the way Welsh Government suggests, it could lead to massive confusion and also lead to extra work for your council officers, because clearly we will get a huge number of phone calls from people concerned about pre-application proposals. Currently, developers do sometimes carry out exhibitions and do consultations with residents, but they do that off their own back, and there is no statutory process around it. And it is generally very, very clear that it's nothing to do with the council, that it's the developer themselves just, if you like, testing the water. And while we're not against that process, we just feel that the way Welsh Government has set it out in this particular document is completely unworkable in times of diminishing resources, would place inordinate responsibilities on community councils and other consultees, because they're expecting community councils and other consultees to get back to consultations from developers within 21 days, when obviously community councils and town councils are currently struggling to get back to planning applications within 21 days. So to have this extra burden placed upon them is completely unrealistic. So that is the general tenet of our response. We support the idea, but you need to really temper how you are approaching this process. Look at what other councils have done, and many developers are quite happy with the approach the Vale has taken, and Bridgend and Cardiff as well, to pre-application procedures. And it's a little bit again of, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel when a lot of this work has already been done? There's also a consultation on planning committees, delegation and joint planning boards. The consultation on planning committees essentially seeks to limit the size of any planning committee in any council to a maximum of 21 members. Clearly, this council fits within that already. There, I believe, only one other council in Wales where they go beyond that figure. So we have questioned why there is specifically a need for legislation to deal with an issue which appears to be correcting itself. You know, legislative time is very limited, and it does seem a little bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Delegation, they are seeking to introduce a Wales-wide system of delegation from the planning committee to officers. Now, we have responded along the lines that we have a very efficient system of delegation in the Vale of Glamorgan. We achieve over 90% of applications are determined through delegated powers. The way they have set it out in their guidance would probably actually lead to more planning applications coming to committee than there are currently going in the Vale of Glamorgan. But notwithstanding that, I think most people would accept that to have the same scheme of delegation in Ceredigion as to what exists in Cardiff makes absolutely no sense, because the types of application that are being considered by those councils are completely different. So your council, and indeed the Royal Town Planning Institute, recommended that if the Welsh Government wanted to set some form of bottom line, they should have a minimum scheme of delegation which councils could build upon if they wish to. And that is what your officers have recommended in their response, that there is a minimum scheme of delegation, and that if councils wish to go beyond that, they could do so. I know the minimum scheme of delegation that was talked about when it was originally mooted by Welsh Government, the Vale of Glamorgan was well above that minimum scheme of delegation. So we would have had to make little changes to our system. But we are concerned that what is proposed by Welsh Government is yet another attempt at micromanaging what the Vale of Glamorgan actually does, and every other council in Wales does. And there are good reasons why each of those councils does what they do in those particular ways. I'm also fairly confident it would not lead to a speeding up of the planning process. And finally, there is the reference to joint planning boards. And while the principle is not necessarily unacceptable, the principle behind it would be to allow councils who merge to actually carry out their planning function. Currently, the law doesn't allow councils that merge to actually have joint planning committees. So this change would allow that to actually happen. We have raised, though, real concerns about the way they propose the committees would be made up, which is solely by the size of the population from each of the councils that makes up that joint planning board. And on that basis, it could lead to, obviously, some councils being swamped in terms of their membership of committees. So we've raised that as a relevant point. And finally, the final consultation was in respect to the review of planning application fees, where they are proposing a 15% increase in planning application fees. We haven't had a rise in planning application fees since 2007, so it is a considerable length of time. England has gone way ahead of us in terms of the fees they charge for planning applications, as has Scotland. So we are saying that that is a good thing, and indeed 15% is the absolute minimum. They should possibly consider further. But one of the other suggestions in this document, which is quite strange really, is that if the application isn't determined within a specific timescale, and for major applications that's 24 weeks, the council would have to repay all of the planning fee to the developer. Now, we have said that will certainly not encourage good practice. It is likely to lead to councils, if they haven't determined the application within that timescale, refusing the application for spurious reasons. It is also possible that developers could try to exploit that as a loophole to try and get their money back. And there is one key point. Welsh Government, in its review, in the conclusion of all these documents, they have to go through a regulatory impact assessment and a financial impact assessment. And their calculation is that given on an average council, the most it would ever have to repay in a year is £4,000. And we have made what we think is the very valid point that actually the types of application which a refund may be applicable to are major schemes, such as housing schemes and major industrial schemes, where actually the fees for those are much more in the order of £50,000 and in excess. So that's a very, very spurious argument to make. We've calculated that if you take their percentage figure, I think it's about 8% of could lead to refund, it actually comes to closer to £100,000 for the Vale of Glamorgan. So it could have a very serious effect in terms of how this council operates and how the planning department operates. So in a nutshell, those are the general comments that are going back to Welsh Government.
Was that your abridged version,
That
Marcus?
was my abridged version, I'm sorry.
That was his short version. God help us when he has the long one. Yeah, I've got Councillor Mark Wilson to speak first. I know John Drysdale is itching to get in. I'll take other names as they come along.
All right, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of matters. If members have a look on page 109 on question 1. Now, this is particularly affect large member wards. In particular, I'm thinking of Dinas Powys in particular here. Also, any ward with more than, say, 4 members or 5 members. And there's a 5-member ward I know in Cardiff, for example. And clearly, I think there's an issue where you only say 1 member for a 5-member ward being on a planning committee. And actually, I think that's kind of wrong. I'm just wondering what your response is on that point. I've got another point as well, but the second point is a bit more technical, but I'll be interested in your view on it.
Okay,
So,
Marcus?
Can I go to that second point now? On the very rare occasion where you don't always endorse officers' recommendations, and it goes to an appeal, it seems to be the advice that you have to go to the appeal yourself if you're the one of the members that actually voted for it. A, how can they enforce that? And B, what's the legal implication of that as well for that member? And how much backing will the council give that person, bearing in mind they voted against the officer's recommendations?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I tried to give the abridged version. I didn't go through everything, so I do apologise. But we have responded very much along the lines that you've stated there. That in where there are larger wards in a council, it is going to be almost impossible to get a full planning committee together if you exclude 2 members from one ward possibly attending. Because obviously all different members have different responsibilities and have to sit on different committees, and it just means that, you know, we've been told that everyone has to work efficiently, and that includes councillors. And when you apply rules like this, it really does seem that you could get to a point where you haven't got enough members to make up a planning committee. So we've just made that point that technically it's going to be very, very difficult to actually get to a point where you could have a full planning committee if you enforce rules like that, especially, as you've just said, in councils with very big wards like Cardiff and well, the Vale has some wards on the very urban areas where, you know, there are a number of members there. So I think it's a very valid point, and we have made that point. Secondly, the point about appeals and making decisions contrary to officer recommendation. This is coming about, actually, and it's probably relevant, as Councillor Johnson, Chair, said that I wasn't present in the briefing beforehand, and it is a shame. But currently, Welsh Government are trying to impose a constitution, a Wales-wide constitution, and this fits in with what they're trying to do through this Wales-wide constitution. They have looked at various various councils deal with situations like this where votes are taken against officer advice, and they have come out with what they consider to be the best procedure. And part of that is to try and get councillors who vote against, or lead councillors who vote against particular officer advice, to be the ones representing the council at the planning appeal that may follow. That being said, firstly, you're not singled out in any particular way other than you are representing the council or the planning committee in terms of why it's made that decision. So there are no implications other than that. no financial implications, no sort of specific implications for that member. But secondly, you would get the full support of the council's planning department if you had to appear. I think it's relevant to say that currently there have been a few appeals in the past 4 or 5 years, and members have appeared on, not necessarily on behalf of the council, but certainly as a witness for the council. And I don't see that changing. I just the only issue would be that Welsh Government would require you to appear as a witness, rather than it being in your gift to say no. So, and I suspect what would happen is if you didn't, it would be considered to be bad practice, and they could award costs against the council on that basis.
Thanks for that, Marcus. John Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. I've had most of my tuppence worth in the comments that were circulated, but just a couple of other things that kind of occurred to me since. First of all, about the planning fees and having to return them if the planning application isn't determined within the time scale. I suspect that Welsh Government are probably quite wedded to the idea of financial penalties in those circumstances. In our response, we've merely said, well, we don't like it, and actually it's going to involve a lot more money than you've calculated. I wonder whether it would be a good idea to actually suggest an alternative, which is that rather than the whole of the fee being lost, that actually a proportion of the fee is lost on a sliding scale according to the length of time that it's overrun the period of determination, and then at least that gives an option if they are wedded to the financial penalty idea. It's also occurred to me to ask them what will their procedure be when they fail to determine the various applications that they're going to take off councils, because I'm fairly sure they won't have the capacity to deal with it. Last point is that I've been used to working with Welsh Government in the housing field on the development of legislation, and very much co-production has been the sort of the watchword, but actually also the practice. The legislation's been put together by numbers of people from the field over a long period of time. It strikes me that this is more of a hole in the wall. They make it up and then they shove it out through the hole in the wall and ask us what they think about it. We could perhaps make the point that they could do with a whole lot more co-production and bringing the field into the development of complex legislation like this.
I'll deal with the second point first. It is a point that has been made to them on numerous occasions. I believe it's been made to the Minister as well directly, and I was actually present at a meeting when it was actually made to the Minister by AMs in a cabinet, a committee review of this process, where I think he left a little bit red-faced. But it's certainly a point that's been strenuously made right through this process, both by the private sector and by councils and by interested parties such as Natural Resources Wales, that a lot of these suggestions that are coming out seem to be kites that are being flown by somebody in Welsh Government without any real supporting evidence for putting them out there. So yes, I think it's worth making the point. I think the documents in their conclusions do make the point that this is micromanagement on a quite horrendous scale, and we as councils don't have the resources to even consider doing half of what they're suggesting we can do, and it really does show a little bit of a lack of understanding of the financial situation that most councils in Wales are under. With regard to the fees, we can make that point, although I would put it to you, it's to be very careful, because the minute you make a suggestion to Welsh Government, they will jump on it and they will say that you're supporting them. And the reason we have been specific in not supporting it in any way, shape or form is that we do feel that there is absolutely no justification, be it for a sliding scale or for any form of return. The work has to be done by your officers in processing a planning application. That never changes. I can't think of any other field in the private or public sector where you get so much for free as you will do in this particular situation if you get developers applying for 150 houses and basically having a free planning application We all know, officers and councillors, the grief that the council has to go through in determining these applications. It is not an easy process. So I would caution any approach down that vein. I think the point that we're trying to make is there is no reason. They might be wedded to the idea, but I have to say developers are not at all enamoured with the idea of the fees being turned. They don't actually see the planning fee as a massive part of what they do. I'm sure it isn't. They actually would rather councils keep it and speed the determination process up. And I think a uniform response that it is really a really bad idea is probably my suggestion of a better approach, rather than making suggestions of sliding scales and whatever else, because they will jump on that and use it.
Okay, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. Specifically with returning the fee, I think this is going to be counterproductive to many applications. If you put in an application for, say, a new house, to determine that within 8 weeks, quite often there are negotiations which will go on. Bearing in mind it's a week to register, probably 2 or 3 weeks to get the comments back. There's a very small timescale, and the temptation would be to refuse an application, whereas with a little bit of help from the planners, it would go through. The other thing is the lion's share of the fee that the council are involved in paying actually happens within the first 2 or 3 weeks, when all the information is correlated and put on the website. The other matter in support of Marcus is the design and access statement. I do feel that actually adds value, which was the original reason for large-scale schemes, and it certainly helps particularly me and other members of the committee in actually understanding the reasons behind the application, and I would support the fact that we do keep that for significant and large applications where it is a great help to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor James.
Briefly, Chairman, I remember when planning fees came in, and to some extent the amount of money that the council got by way of direct grant to carry out its planning function was proportionally adjusted to take account of the fact there were planning fees now. And so it's a little rich now to say that the planning fees, we must now take account of planning fees because that part of our income, if you like, in relation to that, somehow should be handed back to developers. Would that mean that the Welsh Government would have to make up the shortfall in grant? I think the answer to that is no. So I think the only people who would be affected by that would be the ability of our department to manage the planning process properly. And I support what our officer has said on that.
Thank you for that. Well, there is a recommendation that the content of the report be noted, the response to the consultation be agreed, and that the matter be referred to Cabinet for information. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor H.J.W. James. Are members in favour of that recommendation? Please show. And that is unanimous. Thank you for that. Okay then. Councillor Keith Hatton is leaving the room. Thank you.
And so is
and Councillor Parker is also leaving the room, but it is only more temporary. He will be back. Whereas Councillor Hatton's going to another meeting. Okay then, so we're on to planning matters in the real, and the first one on page 158 is Lisworney Garage in Church Street, Lisworney. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for 3 dwellings, 2 semi-detached dwellings and 1 detached dwelling on the site of the Lisworney Garage. It's a scheme, actually. If we look at this, there's a relevant point here to what we've last discussed. This scheme came in 2012, and there have been long-standing negotiations with the agent and the owners to try and achieve a satisfactory scheme. And of course, if the proposals of the Welsh Government go through, we'd have just refused it on about 3 times in the timescale that it's taken to actually get to this point now. And I think that is what a lot of developers are saying to us, is that, you know, they welcome and they appreciate the ability to negotiate and discuss schemes in detail with your officers, so that what eventually comes out at the other end is seen as an acceptable proposal. This is obviously everyone knows Lisworney, I take it, is a small village, a very attractive core. This is right onto the road frontage passing through the village of Lisworney. If you look at the designs of the proposals, what is intended is 2 small cottage-style properties right onto the road frontage to mirror the properties which are next door, and a detached, a relatively small detached property at the rear of the what is the garage premises now. It is very constrained. The gardens do not meet our actual amenity standards, albeit we have looked at that, and we are of the opinion that because of the type of development that's around Lisworney, it is a lot of small cottagey style properties, that we feel that this scheme is acceptable. It is a well-designed scheme now. It has parking provision, albeit that it doesn't meet the parking standards for 2 of the dwellings. It does provide 1 parking space each. It is considered that it is acceptable. There's one final point you should note. The plans, I think Ian has put on the screen here, the plans show the wall of one of the properties, number 2, coming right to the edge of the carriageway there, so that basically there is a very narrow pavement which goes along the main road, but which would disappear as you go around the corner. There isn't a pavement there now, but obviously that would be a wall to a garden, and there is a condition recommending that actually that pavement, the wall is set in, and that pavement continues round the corner, so that basically pedestrians can enter the sort of the safer domestic heart of Lisworney without having to sort of step out onto the road.
Okay. Councillor Ray Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to move the proposal because this is a great scheme for this site. It's been he's trying to do a small business there who's struggling, and it's going to tidy up the area completely for the thing. And I think most of the village support it. So I'd like to move the...
Yeah. Can I just note that, and Marcus has alluded to it, but there are 2 letters of representation received from the neighbours. So they are late reps, Marcus. Councillor Kevin Marnie. That's okay, Kevin.
I know. I was going to make up a point, which I'll come on to now, but you've just raised 2 points there in passing comments, Marcus. Number 1, you mentioned the amenity areas, back gardens, whatever. You feel this is okay because other properties in the area didn't have much of a back garden either. Well, presumably that's because they were old properties when there were no such standards. You've mentioned also there's not enough car parking provision. Presumably other cottages are not in the same position because, again, they're years old. So I find that a bit odd. The point I was initially going to make, I refer to the letter from Mr. Tony Blake of the adjoining property, the Long Room. And I'm sure you're going to put right my naivety right now. I was actually in a similar position here with houses put next to me, where I was concerned that if the houses being built were so close to my end of terrace, I wouldn't be able to maintain my property. This is very much the point that Mr. Blake is making here. I note the officer's response that issues relating to maintenance of neighbouring properties represent a civil matter. But surely you can't build a house so close to somebody else's that they can't maintain their property, or for that matter, the new property can't maintain their property either. And I think it's all built to the fact is none of these would be issues, including your earlier points about the lack of amenity space and the rest of it, if there were 2 properties here. If you're trying to jam 3 properties on this plot here, if she agreed, then this is what's going to happen. But surely it can't be allowed that you can't maintain your house. What happens if there's essential building work done on either of these houses?
Well, I'll cover the issue of the parking and the amenity space. The amenity space is a guideline, a recommendation from your own planning department based around the whole Vale. However, it is just that, a recommendation, supplementary planning guidance. Planning inspectors in many, many cases have discounted it as not a reason to refuse at a planning application. So the general rule of thumb is that you must look at what is around it, the street scene, what other dwellings exist, and if they generally have less amenity space, then it would not be reasonable to enforce higher standards on a particular plot just because of the supplementary planning guidance. Planning inspectors will not wear that; they won't run that through a planning appeal, and it will be dropped. And indeed, with parking spaces, we now no longer have minimum standards. Our standards are maximum standards, and you will often hear highway engineers saying, "Well, there isn't enough parking in accordance with the parking guide." They're not actually strictly true saying that now under the current setup, because there are no minimum standards anymore. I'm sure many councillors here will say to you, there are schemes being allowed for flats in Penarth and Barry where there's no parking at all because they're in very sustainable locations. In this particular case, there is 2 parking spaces proposed for the larger dwelling and 1 space each for the smaller dwellings. In the parking guidelines, actually, it would probably be there should be 1 additional space shared between the 2 smaller dwellings, or given their size. If you took the parking guidance at face value, the loss of that 1 space is not considered to be enough to recommend refusal. And it is noted that the road, Church Street, is a very it's not a very lightly trafficked rural lane, and that you could actually, and vehicles do park there now because it's a garage currently, and people stop on the road along there, so you could actually park on the street still as well then. Finally, with regard to the issue of the Pine End Wall of the existing property and maintenance issues, it is a matter that's not considered by the planning process. But what I would say to you is that there is a set of legislations called the Party Wall Act. And in building this, although they may get planning permission, in building this, they would have to apply the Party Wall Act to that neighbouring property. And basically, through the Party Wall Act, an agreement would be reached as how you would deal with the maintenance of that wall. Whether it would be you would completely cover it over with a roof and tie your roof into your neighbour. And I'm not saying that it's always, people always use it, and people don't always. People go ahead and build extensions, and if they're within a metre of the boundary, they should be applying the Party Wall Act. But it's not that act is not enforced by the council. It is a civil act. And if somebody doesn't enforce it or doesn't use or comply with that act, the person who is aggrieved has to take their own civil action to resolve it. So it's not a process that's governed by the council or by the planning process.
Thank you for the response there. Actually, having gone through this, I was aware of the Party Wall Act, and in my case, they actually built the house away and put a path through. I mean, the Party Wall Act also refers to the footings and the effect on your house and all the rest of it. I do appreciate what you're saying, that it's not part of the planning process. I'd offer a general comment. I realise nothing to do with you, that perhaps it should be part of the planning process, but I realise it's not for you to take that up.
Thank you. Councillor John Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. There's reference to another matter that's not a planning matter either, and that's the bit about the kids sheltering out of the rain for the school bus, which, is relatively minor. What worries me is that presumably the way it is now, there's actually space for kids to stand off the road while they're waiting for the school bus. That space perhaps is going to be significantly less, and I wonder whether the council in another guise could have a look at the safety of children waiting for the school bus in Llysworney and see if anything can be done about it.
Yeah. Before you answer, Marcus, Ray might be able to throw some light on that.
What it is, the owner of the garage at the moment, where the petrol pumps, where house 2 is now, there's a bit of a little shelter there where the pumps are, and they often shelter under there. And that is, they don't shelter on anything else, it's just on the property of the garage. So it's just that he's always given that up. But I know people have asked if there could be a bus shelter in 106 money or something like that. But no 106 money is there.
If I come back quickly on that, clearly, however you look at it, it's not really ideal for children to be sheltering next to a petrol pump. I know it's not used as a petrol pump anymore, but that's what was happening. It was a working garage, so it wasn't an ideal scenario in any event. But there is no Section 106. This scheme is too small to merit a Section 106 contribution. It would be something for education colleagues to think about in terms of where they pick children up from Llysworney, I suspect. Not really something the planning process can deal with.
Okay. Councillor Jeff James.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't think anybody seconded the local member, Councillor Thomas, so I'm happy to second this proposition, Chairman.
Right, thank you for that. So it has been moved and seconded. Any other member want to raise anything? Otherwise, I'll go straight to a vote. Okay. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. That's everybody. Yeah. Yes, that's clearly carried. It was unanimous. Yes, he did vote. Yeah. Okay then, thank you for that. Yes, he ought to go and get him back, yeah.
Sorry, we need to get Andy back.
Yeah, they're going to get him. John's leaving and you're going to tell him, are you? Thank you. Just a short, brief interlude while we fetch Councillor Parker back. Thank you for joining us again, Councillor Parker. We're on page 176, and this is the small little scheme. I think it's a reduction in the number of houses that were originally asked for. It's land to the northwest of Benderick Road in Barry. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for 9 dwellings, one set of link houses, one set of 2 semi-detached houses, and 2 sets of 2 semi-detached houses. The plans are on the screen there for you to see. This has previously been the subject of an outline planning application which has now lapsed. That outline application actually was for units, which on the land in blue you can see on page 176, sorry, industrial units, and for 12 houses on the land in red. So it is a reduction of what was previously proposed, albeit that never came to a full detailed planning application.
Okay. Any member? Councillor Penrose.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, only a query. I can remember if I call it phase 1 of this development, because we went on a site visit and there was a lot of concern about limited parking in the road and with the extra houses. And the suggestion was, on the proposed site on this application, there were going to be additional 9 parking spaces, as I recall. It would appear now that, although the houses have been reduced, so has the overflow parking that was suggested in the original application. Knowing the area, living in Surrey, so not far away, I know it's a very congested road. There is an awful lot of parking. They're even parking right round the roundabout into Atlantic Trading Estate. And I just want to make sure, really, we, as an authority, have looked at this and are dealing with it in accordance with the problems that are there.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to say, I do recall what you're talking about, Councillor Penrose. The additional 9 spaces actually were in the, if you like, phase 1 of the scheme. They were on the, if you look on the plan here, sort of to the west side, if you like, of the site there, closest to Bendricks Road. There are 9 spaces along that part there in front of the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses of that scheme. So those were the 9 spaces. In this particular part of the scheme, they are fully complying with our parking standards. Having talked about that previously, they're providing sufficient parking and some visitor parking for the houses which they're proposing. So they're not providing additional parking, but those 9 spaces are provided on the phase 1 of the scheme.
Ample parking then. Okay. Any other member? No. Officer's recommendation is to approve. Members happy with that?
We need
Yeah.
a mover and a second.
Yeah. Have we had a mover and a second? I don't think we have. You'll move it, Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Parker. Okay. All those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? Thank you. 1 abstention. Otherwise, the committee have voted in favour. Thank you for that. Councillor Parker has just left the room again because I think this is his application. This is Lanarkshire Vineyard at Hensel. And there's late reps on this as well, Marcus. It's on page 203 for those who were following the agenda. Anything to add?
Yes, thank you, just the response of Natural Resources Wales confirming no objections. This is an application for a 19-bedroom or an extension to, if you like, to Llanelch Vineyard to provide 19 extra letting bedrooms for hotel accommodation. The plans are before you. It is essentially closing off what is pretty much an existing courtyard within the building, between the existing farmhouse and the existing hotel and catering. It's a catering, I wouldn't call it college, but it's a training centre in the vineyard. The vineyard itself, as members will be aware, has had a previous planning permission to expand its operations and to include a large wing. Which, if we go back to the site plan, there we go. Oh, that one there. A large wing coming southwards from where you can see. I think it says secret garden room there. A large wing coming down towards the road, towards Hensel Road, which was to provide facilities for weddings and other venues and conferences. That hasn't been built as yet, but they are looking to progress that application as quickly as possible. But as part of their general development scheme, they have expanded their letting operations. They have a hotel going quite efficiently there, and in fact, when weddings are held, they don't have enough accommodation to accommodate all the people who wish to stay. So they have proposed this 19-bed unit to be sited at to the rear of the farmhouse. They have designed it to look as close as possible to the existing farmhouse with wings either side. It is a scheme which will probably not be visible from outside the site. It does fit within the site itself and the vineyard to the rear, and your officers feel that given the tourism benefits for the Vale as a whole, that it can be recommended for approval. One key issue is obviously there have been some concerns from the local community council about the possibility of increase in traffic, but I think it's worth pointing out that the intention here is probably to cater for what is largely already attending the venue through weddings and other functions, and just to be able to accommodate all the people that want to stay there, rather than those people having to come in their cars and eventually leave again at the end of the evening. So the traffic impact assessment has been looked at by your officers, and they do consider there not to be any increased impact.
Okay, Councillor James.
Chairman, I'm going to move with the officer's recommendation. It's really nice to see a scheme and a development like this making progress and providing a successful business and tourism in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I would happy to move approval.
Have you got a seconder?
Wait a minute, please.
Yeah.
Marcus, do you want to amend the recommendation?
Yes, there is. Apologies, there is one change. There's a typographical error in the legal agreement recommendation, where it refers, I think somebody's done a cut and paste job, it refers to the events complex business, which was obviously the previous plan application. And what it should say is, subject to the legal agreement, to tie the additional accommodation building hereby approved to the existing enterprise, and to ensure the aspects of the business would remain fully integrated. And so basically just replacing events complex business with additional accommodation.
Marcus, sorry. Isn't it as part of the 106 agreement? Though?
Yes, as part of the 106 agreement, yeah.
Is it worth making that clear? Because it says, because it refers to two...
Well, that would be, yeah, the intention is that would be part of the Section 106 agreement, yes.
Okay, subject to that amendment, are you happy to accept the amendment? And is your seconder happy to accept? Okay, I know that, was it Bob who indicated you wanted to speak? Okay, I've got... Right. Any other member before I go to the vote? All happy then? Officer's recommendation. Please show. That is unanimous, so that's clearly carried. Would somebody mind, John, maybe, to run up the stairs and bring back Councillor Parker? Yeah. Thank you for rejoining us, Councillor Parker. Yes. Okay. We're on to page 221. This is 67 to 79 Dougherty Road, the shopping parade in Landock. Marcus, anything to add?
Not really, Chair. This is an application which actually we've considered previously. It's coming back before you because amendments are required to the legal agreement. The application previously was for standard accommodation. This application now is for wholly affordable housing. Hence, the legal agreement has been tempered to take account of that fact and reducing certain requirements. It is in total a building for 18 self-contained residential units over 3 stories to replace a previous mixed-use shop and flat above unit. It is quite a modern design. As I say, it is pretty much the same as the previous approval that was granted in 2010, I believe. The history is here. Yeah. Oh, 2007, granted 2009. So the key issue here is that we are seeking to reduce the requirements of the Section 106 agreement to take account of the fact that it is now wholly affordable housing.
There we are. Councillor Mark Wilson.
I'd like to fully support this action and go for recommendation.
Officer's recommendation approved. And Councillor Drysdale is second you. Any member want to add anything, or Councillor Williams?
Yeah, on page 222, it mentions about the public right-of-way officer asking the planning applicant's agreement to withdraw their objection to the DMMO. What's happening with that? Do we know?
I mean, that's a separate process to the planning process. We would. There's a diversion at the front. If we go back to the site here, there is a at the front there's a sort of a diversion required because part of that's in the highway, part of it's a footpath, but that is a process that runs completely independently of the planning process, as we all know, because of various issues with footpaths. So I can't update you on that, I'm afraid. That would be a matter for the footpaths officer to update you on.
No doubt it'll be coming to a footpaths committee in the near future.
Can
with,
I just
probably some recommendations.
Chair, can I just ask why have we been given a reason why they haven't withdrawn that objection, as it impacts on council time and effort?
They haven't given that to us, no. I mean, it's not really a matter for us to consider as part of this planning application.
Yeah. Okay. We've had a mover and a seconder. Are members minded to approve this application? Yes. All those in favour? It's pretty unanimous. Any against? Yes. Councillor Marnie has voted against. Okay. But otherwise it's unanimous. Thank you. This is an application now that's before the council. It's the land to the rear of St David's Primary School in Comwellston, and I know you're going to speak about it. It was subject to a site visit today. I'm still covered in the mud from going across that field. Yeah, it's subject to a site visit. I know there's some late representations, and I'll ask Marcus to... Sorry,
Chair, could I ask for this to be deferred? There's a lot of rate reps all about this drainage. We saw it as a wet spot today. There's a lot for us to take in as a planning committee, and I think to be fair to the residents of Comwellston, we should spend a bit more time looking at this scheme before we come to decision. So I'd like to propose this is deferred.
Okay, you got a seconder? Councillor Hartree will second you. Marcus, anything to add to that before I take it to a vote?
All I would say is there are not matters here that can't be dealt with by planning condition, which is the same way we've dealt with the numerous other housing applications over the last few months, such as Lantwick Major and Wenvo. The situation is exactly the same. I don't think that a deferral would lead to any change in the way the application is presented to you. So it's obviously a matter for members, but I think it is relevant to point out that they could lead to a non-determination appeal, which would take obviously any decision out of the council's hands and could lead to considerable reduction in the amount of payments under section 106.
Before you do say something, Ray, can I ask the gentleman in the auditorium there, are you using a camera?
You're not allowed to use the camera.
Yeah, can you put it away? It's actually illegal to use a camera in the council chamber. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, shouldn't be using it. Okay, right, what's the reason for your deferment again then, Ray?
Because there are flooding issues and sewage issues in the village, which we've been told that the monies are going to come forward from this project to put that right, help put that right. But there's issues there at the moment, and to build these houses without us actually seeing the upgrade of the Cowbridge treatment plant, I think would be foolish of us, in that we could be opening ourselves liable to costs if the houses in Colwinston at the moment were flooded. We'd be as liable as would the developer if those houses are flooded. So I think we should be looking at this a bit more, checked with. We had things given to us today which we haven't, they're in the paperwork, but they're not conditioned strong enough, and I think it'd be good if we could go back and sort this out.
Okay, you're asking for a deferment. You've had a seconder. Marcus, do you want to add anything more to what's been said?
All I would say is that obviously the report that was on the updated report submitted by the Community Council has been looked at by the Council's drainage engineer. Obviously I will run through this in some detail, but the Council's drainage engineer is confident that the condition that has been put on the scheme enables him and the Council to be fully assured that the scheme, that when it eventually is submitted and approved, will meet all the requirements necessary to ensure there is no flooding downstream. Also, in terms of the Welsh Water comments, what I would say to you is that yes, there is a programmed work of improvement to Welsh Water's system, which deals with the Colwinston area, but that currently indicates a date in 2018, but it is not acceptable to Welsh Government for us to defer an application until 2018 until the works are done. I would draw members' attention to the Primrose Hill appeal, which we obviously won a couple of months ago, and while we did win that, during the course of the appeal process, a legal agreement was negotiated and drawn up with the prospective applicants, and part of that dealt with exactly the same issue, because it's exactly the same treatment works and which that scheme had to flow sewage into. And the planning inspector in that particular case was perfectly acceptable to a legal agreement and condition limiting occupation until such time as the works had been done. So I think we would be on very dangerous ground deferring the application purely because the works hadn't yet been done, especially now they've been programmed, because when Primrose Hill was considered by the inspector, those works hadn't actually been programmed by Welsh Water. They've now given a hard and fast date, which is in the planning condition that's recommended to you.
Okay, I've got a couple of speakers. Councillor Marnie first.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the point. I mean, obviously, it was brought to our attention today, as it is in the paperwork here. We had many objections, or several, I should say, initially by Welsh Water. And it's very rare for them to object to anything, quite frankly, in my experience on this committee. And quite frankly, areas that are flooded, sewage problems, well documented, and they don't object at all. So the fact that they've objected here, I feel, is very significant. And of course, our own officials here, as you point out initially. We've got a report here by Hydro GIS Limited of Chalgove in Oxon. Seems a very substantial document here. I don't know if Hydro GIS are any better or any worse than any other hydraulics engineers. I'm a layman, I'm sure we all are in these matters. But their conclusion, of course, is that the figures that have been presented to them and the proposals are totally and utterly inadequate. Why, I don't mean the way this is going to sound, why would we believe Welsh Water, or I think it is permissible possibly to question our own officials, why would we take their word any more than a word sure? You know, you're asking people who don't know about these matters. We can see the situation there. You don't have to be an idiot just to look at the site. And of course, some of the pictures are handed round today, which you could imagine anyway. Welsh Water, it would appear to me, are already letting down the residents of Colwinston, quite frankly, if they've got sewage flowing over their road. And it's apparently doesn't appear they've ever bothered too much about that. So at the very least, surely these things should be done and tested for some substantial period of time before anything's even considered anyway. But going back to my original point, I appreciate these consultants are working on behalf of objectors, as it were, in the community council, but I don't know, if they're on the level, why shouldn't we take as much consideration of their report as we do of anybody else's?
What I would say to you is that it is relevant to note, unfortunately we haven't run through all the late representations, so perhaps I should run through the late representations, but I'll answer Councillor Marnie's question first. It is relevant to note that our own drainage engineer does not accept fully the report that was submitted by Redrow. What he has said is that he believes the scheme in its principle is acceptable, but there are details and matters which they have covered in that report which need further information and need further submissions before he is completely satisfied. And that is why the condition has been recommended to you, which says, because it doesn't say that their scheme is what has to be implemented. What it says is, notwithstanding the scheme submitted, a full engineering details and hydrology report and everything else has to be resubmitted to the council to satisfy the council's drainage engineer that the water that comes off the land can be accommodated and the water that comes off the houses can be accommodated, and can ensure that it doesn't create any additional problems downstream from what is there now. And what I would say to you is that is no different. I mean, obviously it's a very emotive issue here. The residents have raised it. It is no different to the issues that have been considered in Lantwick Major, in Wenvo, in a number of other sites where we've had to consider large-scale housing developments bigger than this scheme. And we've ended up having to apply conditions which are ultimately our drainage engineers either approve or don't approve, and ultimately the council adopt through commuted sums, because that is also in this report that the developer will have to pay us commuted sums to maintain those systems. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but actually, although the planning process is here to consider what is before us, we're not here to consider necessarily the exact detail of the drainage scheme which is going to be submitted. That will be for our council, our engineers, to consider as part of the discharge of the planning conditions attached to the report.
Okay. What I'm a bit worried about is we've been asked to defer this, and you're getting into the land drainage now. So I want to hear from councillors about, are we going to defer this or are we not? So let's go to John Drysdale and we'll take it one step at a time. Yeah, and I know Andrew wants to speak.
I was on the drainage, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we should defer it. That's the response to your last question. Okay. I was at the site visit as well, and I saw the lay of the land and I heard what residents had to say. And I went away this afternoon and I thought I really owe it to the residents and the community council who've bothered to commission these reports to go into them and look at them. And I read the hydrolysis GI, whatever it was, report as well, and then raised some questions with Marcus before the meeting. Now, obviously, in terms of improvement of the Cowbridge sewage treatment plant, there's a chicken and egg situation here. Maybe those improvements, or not to the same extent, would go ahead unless this development is going ahead. But you can't make the development contingent then on the sewage treatment plant changes being made. So I was concerned about it. A number of points came out to me in my own reading and discussion with Marcus. One is that the Redrow development is not responsible for dealing with the whole of the water flow on the catchment basin for that valley. It's only responsible for ensuring that any additional flow off the hard surfaces of the development are dealt with. So that's quite significant. The second significant thing for me was that the condition that's been placed about the drainage improvements and the whole system being acceptable to our engineer before any of the houses are occupied. Also included addressing the issue that I did hear from residents, which was about the sewerage attenuation tank that overflows sometimes, and that's why sewerage ends up in a stream. That's a different attenuation tank from the attenuation, what's the pond that's actually on the site and part of the development itself. So if that attenuation tank is a problem, then it has to be sorted and made acceptable and working properly before that condition can be accepted. So, you know, in my looking into it, I felt that those conditions were acceptable to me. And yeah, we would all like the situation to be absolutely 100% firm. We can put those houses there and everything will be hunky-dory. But unfortunately, we can't do that. But the best we can do is put the condition in that says everything will be hunky-dory before anybody can actually move into those homes. And then that puts the onus on Redrow to work it out with Welsh Water to make sure that everything is actually working properly. So on that basis, as Marcus said, I don't think we're going to end up next month with any better situation than we've got now. And to that extent, I think we should just get on and decide the application.
Okay. I've got Councillor Parker, and I know Ray Thomas wants to come back and speak. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just for clarification, really, obviously, if all the sewage works, the surface water drainage, the attenuation things, does not come up to it, the planning falls until they can actually satisfy. And another small point, obviously, purchasers, solicitors would not allow anybody to complete on a house if they weren't 100% satisfied that all the conditions had been met, and they rigorously check those.
Okay. Councillor Ray Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. The problem is there is an element of doubt. Marcus has said our own engineers have got this doubt whether the system will work. And from that, in the summary of that report done by the community, for the Community Council, it was saying the Environment Agency maps of the surface water show that's a flood risk area. And surely we should be looking at that sort of thing as well. This is a flood risk area. We've looked at these areas in Lantwit and places like that, and we've made sure that these houses have been away from the flood risk area. And there we are, putting them on a flood risk area. So that is, I wanted we've more to look at. We seem to be rushing this one. A lot of these paperwork didn't come in until just before Christmas. A site visit had already been arranged. The report was written more or less before this report actually got to the council. So I think we are rushing this one a bit, and I'd like us to slow down a bit, look at it. A month, that's all we're asking, to look at it all. And I'd be happy in my own mind that
Yeah, I know Marcus wants to come back, and then I'll take Councillor Parker.
Just to clarify a point there, that the drainage engineer hasn't raised doubts about whether the land can be drained. He's some concerns with regard to the report as submitted by Redrow currently. He is very confident that a scheme can be facilitated there. His email I have in front of me here, which actually came in at about 3 o'clock today to the office, makes it clear that having assessed both the Redrow scheme and the comments from the Community Council's hydrologist, he is confident a scheme can be developed. It is possible it will involve amendments to what Redrow have currently got before us, but that will be very, very happy that could be dealt with by the condition, which is a Grampian condition, because it says, notwithstanding the submitted drainage strategy, no development shall commence on site until the detailed design of the land and surface water drainage system has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and the approved scheme shall be implemented prior to the first beneficial occupation of any of the dwellings, and so maintained at all times thereafter. So no development can commence until they have satisfied our own drainage section that they have an adequate scheme to deal with surface water drainage from this site. That is not going to change no matter how many times this is deferred. That condition can't be breached. If it is breached, then we will be down on them like a ton of bricks, and we'll be serving stop notices and all sorts of things. So it is that is a matter of fact, and our drainage engineer isn't going to change his mind. He's had numerous submissions made to him. He is confident that a scheme can be produced to deal with the surface water flows. It is maybe not the scheme that is currently before us in its fullest form, but he is confident that there is a scheme there which will deal with it. In respect of the Welsh Water, we are now in a very firm position in that they have said very, very clearly that there are works programmed, whether Red Row contribute or not, in 2018 to improve the Cowbridge wastewater treatment plant. Those works will possibly be speeded up by Red Row contributing, whether they do that through a legal agreement attached to this planning consent or whether they do it with a separate legal agreement with Welsh Water, or however it's done. But that is very, very common with housing developments where they're programmed by Welsh Water. Developers will contribute to speed the process up. But it is a fact that there is a condition which says until we are satisfied as the local planning authority that the works have been completed, then none of those dwellings can be occupied. And as part of that, if it includes us saying that we need to be sure that there are no immediate sewage problems within Colmanston itself, and that condition can be held, and we can not sign off that condition until those issues are resolved. And we will raise those issues with Welsh Water. They haven't raised them with us, but we will raise those issues with Welsh Water.
Okay. Yes, okay then. And then I'm going to ask Councillor Powell to
say in
speak.
2018, when the sewage system is going to be updated, that's 4 years from now. This planning permission says it must be started within 5 years. What if it drags on a bit, as most of these schemes do? Will this planning, they have to reapply? Because it could be after the 5 years is 2019. So
yeah, I mean, if they hadn't commenced work within the 5 years of any consent issued, yes, they'd have to reapply.
Okay, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. When I heard Councillor Thomas's concerns with regards to the fact that one of our own officers expressed concerns, and that therefore we should perhaps not rush into this but look for a deferment to go into this in greater detail to explore why our drainage officer has these concerns. I was minded to support Councillor Thomas. However, I wanted to ask the officer to give us the reassurance that I thought was here in the recommendations, that nothing in fact can go ahead until all of those concerns have been addressed and we as a council and a planning authority are satisfied. The officer has just come back, which I'm grateful for, and he has put my mind at rest that the conditions as laid out in the officer's recommendation ensure that we will not allow this to go ahead until all of our concerns have been met and satisfied as far as the council's concerned. And I just wondered if therefore Councillor Thomas has taken on board the reassurances that the officer has given to us, because now I'm no longer minded to support Councillor Thomas, because it appears that we have those reassurances in place.
Very well. Somebody else, yeah, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah,
why Councillor Thomas is making up his mind.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to pay attention to members, and members have a look on certain conditions, and in particular the conditions on 23 and 24, which make it fully unequivocal that yeah, that's what I said, 23 and 24, pretty unequivocal that in fact, the planners here have obviously discussed this at great length with the drainage section of the Vale Council to say basically we're not going to do anything in terms of any building of houses until we got a drainage system which they are satisfied. And obviously that drainage system here will cope with surface water in terms of attenuation systems, and obviously with the foul, with the Cowbridge works there. So I am quite happy that the officers have looked at this with very serious consideration. As far as I can see, at the beginning of the plan application, it talks about that this has been on the table almost a year now, and I think we know at some time we've got to make a decision as a planning committee.
Okay. Councillor Drysdale.
Just very quickly, a moment ago, Marcus referred to we could make specific mention of all the sewerage issues could be sorted out. That doesn't currently appear in specific wording in 23 and 24. Are you suggesting an amendment, Marcus, that would incorporate that sort of wording?
There's a condition actually proposed. Condition 23, just to clarify, because obviously the late reps haven't gone through, but condition 23 is amended to what I read out previously, which I know Councillor Wilson had picked up on, which is a granting condition that says no development can commence until. Condition 24 remains as it was. There's an additional condition 26 proposed, which currently, as proposed, says no dwellings hereby approved shall communicate with the public sewerage system until either the programmed upgrade of the Cowbridge wastewater treatment works scheduled for completion on the 1st of April 2018 has been completed and confirmed in writing by the local planning authority, or the necessary improvements to the Cowbridge wastewater treatment works to accommodate the foul flows from the development hereby approved in accordance with the requirements as outlined in Dura Cymru's feasibility study reference there have been completed and confirmed in writing by the local planning authority. There is no reason why we could not insert programmed upgrade and any other necessary works to Colwinston, on the Colwinston area, for example, into that condition, which would cover then and make it clear that we want to be sure that there isn't going to be an overflow to existing holding tanks for sewerage in the Colwinston area. There's no reason why we couldn't do that. Watertight or sewerage tight or whatever you want to say.
Yes. I just want to ask Ray Thomas, is that acceptable to you? Well,
yeah, but you'd have to take
yeah.
a vote.
Would it be helpful if I asked the officer to go through the late reps first? You have. Councillor Val Hartree has seconded. You want to vote on it? Okay then.
Does Marcus want to go through the
Yeah. Do you want to go through the late reps first, Marcus, or do you want me to take this vote? Yeah. Okay, we'll take a vote. We're being asked by Councillor Thomas to defer this matter for a month. It's a simple put to the committee. Do you wish to defer it for a month?
For further consideration.
For further consideration.
Late representations,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. So those all in favour, please show. Yeah. That's 2. Those against.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
2 for, 16 against. So that's clearly carried. Sorry?
James never voted.
Did you not vote, Councillor James? Yeah. So what are you? Yeah. You're going to abstain. So we've got 1 abstention.
So the motion is defeated.
The motion is defeated, and we're now going to talk about the scheme. So, Councillor Williams.
Chair, can I, having had discussed this at some length already, move the officer's recommendation?
Okay, we've got a mover. Councillor Hartree.
If you don't mind, because I need to go to another meeting as well. I've just got a few concerns on this, especially after the site visit today. I mean, there's a lot of objectors there. First of all, on the percentage. In my ward, we're concerned about the possible... Beg your pardon? In my ward, we're concerned about a possible 10% increase in the number of dwellings. And we've got 3,500 dwellings. Mainly concerned by the infrastructure, I have to say. Here, if I understand it, there's a possible 40% increase on the number of houses. That's the figure I was given by somebody. And if I were in their shoes, on that basis alone, I wouldn't be happy. The second one, affordable housing. I'm disappointed that this council has agreed to lower the council's preference of 35% to 25% affordable housing, because the developer's not happy. I bet he isn't. And I think it was the chairman of the community council who said that they would prefer 100% affordable housing to enable youngsters from the village to come back and live there. As he said, they have enough expensive dwellings there already. And that isn't a comment on how much those are going to cost necessarily. Highways, as you know from the past, I'm never happy with highways, but their main concerns seem to be the highway movement on we would call it an estate, just for this thing, you know, movement within the estate. There was no concern, as far as I could see, it was difficult conditions at the time, that they are all going to leave by one exit close to next to the local school. I didn't think the lanes were too bad generally, I have to say that. Flooding, well, we've had enough discussion about flooding, and the photograph says a lot, and we certainly experienced the conditions there today. There's certainly a well-documented history of flooding in the area and raw sewage, etc. And I know there's been probably more discussion when I go, but you have to wonder, whatever arrangements are made, would the attenuation tank or whichever it is be sufficient to deal with this? And one more point, prematurity, is it dealt with? Am I wrong, or is this a candidate site in the draft LDP?
It's a site, yes.
It's a site, yes.
I mean, it's not the first one to come through, and they'll show more, but you do wonder whether these candidate sites should be applying for planning permission before the LDP is officially adopted, which is what, going to be 2016 at least? 17? It's not the first to come through, but I doubt whether this should be happening. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. I'll let you go on because you want to leave, but the officer's going to pick up all those points because he hasn't spoken yet about the scheme. So, yeah, so if you can incorporate those all in your preamble agenda, we'll take it on from there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Right, well, very quickly, there are a number of late representations. You've got them in front of you. I don't intend going in any great detail. We've been through some of them already. There is proposed an amendment to Condition 2 of the plan, which deals with the submitted plan reference numbers. That is because additional details were submitted by the agent. There are the formal comments of the Council's highway engineer confirming no objections. There are the formal comments of Welsh Water and the Council's drainage engineer, which have been supplemented in addition to these today, confirming they have no objections subject to amendments to conditions and the additional number 26. We have comments from the applicant's agents who are not happy with the condition recommended by Welsh Water and want a 12-month time limit placed on the work, so that if Welsh Water start, that no matter whether they finish them or not, they're allowed to start occupying their dwellings within 12 months. I'll come back to that. There are the comments of Jane Hutt AM drawing attention to the drainage report commissioned by local residents. There are comments of a local resident relating to the conservation area, and the response is there from the planning officer in relation to the effect on the conservation area. And there's a further 21 letters submitted raising issues of concern with regard to the scheme, which are included with some additional comments from your planning officer. Just to sort of round everything off, 64 houses proposed on this scheme. The houses are broken down into the form of 33 four-bedroom houses, 13 three-bedroom houses, just very quickly, 4 two-bedroom houses, and 6 one-bedroom flats. It is a mix which is quite a, I have to say, in a village location like this, quite a good mix. It's a spread right across, albeit I suspect some people would say there should be less four-bedroom houses and perhaps more three-bedroom, two-bedroom houses. But I have to say, given the location of it in rural Vale, it is a good mix of house types. I will come on to the Section 106 agreement, which is proposed with this application. There have been very long-standing and difficult negotiations over this Section 106 agreement with the developer, but one key issue of those is the affordable housing, and Councillor Hartrees quite rightly pointed out that we have accepted 25% affordable housing on this site rather than the normal 35%. That being said, we are also getting a contribution of over £500,000 to be spent on affordable housing elsewhere in the Vale of Glamorgan, and that the reason partly for that is that the affordable housing that is being proposed is 80% social rented affordable housing, which is where the demand in the Vale of Glamorgan exists. There is very, very low demand for part ownership affordable housing. And there are a number of reasons for that, not least of which is that it's very difficult to get a mortgage for part ownership. That is an issue which we are trying to push Welsh Government to address, but that's a completely separate issue and one which isn't relevant now. So it's 80% social rented affordable housing. We know what the waiting lists are in various areas. What this council has made a great bones about not doing is transporting people in need of affordable housing from one area to another area. So, for example, if people are in need of affordable housing in Dinas Powys, we wouldn't want to transport them from Dinas Powys to Colwinston to find that affordable housing. We're very committed to putting affordable housing where it is needed. And the reason that we've sought a contribution and accepted a reduction in the number of affordable housing on this site is that in this location, the demand for social rented affordable housing is of the order that is proposed in this scheme, and the contribution will be used to satisfy demand in those areas which are greatest, such as Barry, for example, and other areas. It is £500,000 and will provide considerable amounts of affordable housing accommodation, as I say, in those other areas. So it is it is wrong to say they are only providing 25% affordable housing. Your Section 106 officer and the Housing Department have calculated that actually it is 35% affordable housing, albeit that £500,000 worth of that is the additional 10%, which is going to be used elsewhere in the Vale of Glamorgan. Just other key issues just to run through in terms of the Section 106 agreement. We've done affordable housing. It is proposed to provide £203,000 for enhancement of education facilities in the area, the lion's share of which will be for Cowbridge Comprehensive School, although there is a small contribution for the local school as well. There is a contribution of £41,000 to enhance children's play facilities in Colwinston. There is also a requirement for a scheme for future maintenance of on-site open space, public art of £15,000, a contribution of £128,000 to provide or enhance sustainable transport facilities in the vicinity of the site, and that could include bus stops and other facilities and shelters. Obviously, there is the requirement now that the developer play a contribution towards the provision or completion of the upgrade of Cowbridge wastewater treatment works to accommodate all the dwellings hereby approved. That may or may not be agreed, depending on whether they decide to wait for Welsh Water to do the works themselves without contribution. If they don't decide to do that, they will enter into a legal agreement to do that. There is to pay a contribution towards the adoption maintenance of the drainage solution proposed, sum to be agreed. We do not yet know what the commuted sum will be for the maintenance. Obviously, until we've got a finalised drainage scheme, we won't know what that will be, but needless to say, they will have to pay for its ongoing maintenance through a commuted sum payable to this council. And obviously, finally, there is the administration fee for monitoring and maintaining that legal agreement. So overall, your officers are commending this to you. We feel it is a good package. It is a scheme which, if you like, wipes its nose in terms of what it is providing to accommodate and overcome certain problems. One very pertinent point was made by Councillor Hartree about the size of the increase, and it is relevant that approximately, given varying numbers on which houses are in Colwinston and which ones aren't, it is approximately 40% increase. That is quite a large increase given it's a small village, but what I would say to you is the reason that site has been allocated in Colwinston is it is a very sustainable village. It has the majority of facilities needed to make a sustainable village, such as a school, community hall, church, public house. So that process was why the LDP allocated that site for in the form it has been. Indeed, I think the LDP allocated for 66 houses. This is 64. You know, it's neither here nor there at the end of the day. But clearly, it is unfortunate that these sites are coming forward before the LDP has been adopted. There is nothing we can do about that. I think if you were to look at the prematurity argument, the best, if you like, commentary that has been provided outside of your officers is what the inspector said in the Primrose Hill appeal, where we did try to argue prematurity in refusing that appeal, and he dismissed it out of hand. In his view, where there's a deposit plan or draft plan in place, prematurity can't be used as an argument to refuse an application. Whether he's right, whether that's right is another question, and I think obviously that's to do with the actual planning system we're sitting within, and there's nothing we can do about that here. That's something for Welsh Government to deal with. But you know, there is a question to be asked about the fact that all these housing schemes are coming forward, and this is not the first one, as you've rightly pointed out. We've had Wenvo, we've had Lantwick Major. There are numerous others in the pipeline which we're going to have to look at over the coming months, and make a decision on whether we can accept them or we can't. Final point on that particular issue is obviously housing land availability, and we've all, you know, we've talked about this previously at other applications, and the fact that now in this current year we've achieved a 7.2-year housing land availability figure, which should mean that technically we've got enough land, as Welsh Government would argue. However, the problem is Welsh Government are in the process of changing the way those figures are calculated. If, for example, you were to adopt the LDP tomorrow, we would not have 5 years housing land supply, because the way the calculation is worked out, it's very, very complicated, but essentially the housing provision has been so depressed by the recession that the council would not be meeting its obligation, as Welsh Government see it. I always find that rather difficult, because we don't build houses, and therefore how can we force house builders to build houses? But essentially the way they look at it is that we should be providing the sites. That's as much as we can do, is provide the site for them to build the houses on. So it is a very relevant point. What we are fighting tooth and nail against, which is what Welsh Government's proposals are, and you may recall a few months ago we did report our response to a draft technical advice note that they'd introduced, which is that if they get their way and we haven't got an adopted local development plan, we cannot have a housing land supply. And essentially, I'm very, very concerned that could lead to an absolute flood of applications coming in on all sorts of sites, such as Primrose Hill and others, which are completely unacceptable. And there's very little we can do to turn them down until we get the LDP in place. So essentially, if I sort of sum that all up, what I'd say to you is, yes, this is a site which has come forward ahead of the LDP. However, it is not a key site where there are concerns that in developing it, it could be premature and lead to issues that the plan cannot be adopted. It is not that situation. It is a site where we need to keep looking to approve sites of this scale to maintain our housing land availability. And actually, if you think about the fact that we need to adopt the plan in 12 months' time, we need to be in a position when we adopt that plan that we've got 5 years housing land supply. And if the plan was adopted tomorrow, we wouldn't have that figure. So clearly, we do have to look at these sites. They are difficult decisions, but we are in a position. We're in the position we're in. We have to look at them reasonably. I think one final point on this one, if the scheme is held up until 2018 when Welsh Water say they're going to do the work, that actually ties in with when the LDP suggests this site should have come forward in any event. There is no guarantee that will happen, mind, because the developer could pay to bring it forward.
Okay, I think there are a number of speakers, but I think Councillor Marnie had his hand up first, so...
Thank you, Fred.
Yeah.
When I brought up earlier the report by the hydraulic engineers commissioned by the Community Council, I didn't actually mention then basically how disappointed I was that what is actually here, a national house building company, hadn't actually provided a flood prevention scheme that either didn't provide anything or provided one so inadequate that our engineer, Welsh Water, who I say in my experience have an appalling record of just letting anything go, and of course these hydraulic engineers have all said is totally inadequate. The reason I mention this, or possibly more of a comment than a question, is picked up on what you just said there, that they're actually asking for a dispensation that if Welsh Water take longer than 12 months to complete this work, which quite frankly is up to Welsh Water, although for the residents of Colwynson, I hope they crack on with this sewage stuff tomorrow, quite frankly. I think that tells us everything about the integrity of the house builders here. I'm absolutely appalled, quite frankly. It means they couldn't care less, is what they're saying.
I think what I would say is that in discussions around the Primrose Hill appeal, under duress, Welsh Water agreed to that. And of course, as is developers want, they will pick up on issues that have come up on other sites, and they're trying to impose a similar issue on the council in this particular instance. My advice to you would be that those are completely different circumstances. That was a ongoing planning appeal where we were trying to discuss a Section 106 agreement on the hoof, if you like, because obviously we were virtually at the point of the appeal being heard by an inspector. And indeed, some of the discussions happened while the appeal was being discussed by the inspector. We are not at that position now. And for a satisfactory development, I would suggest that we would be much more comfortable requiring the works to be done to the satisfaction of Welsh Water rather than some artificial time limit of 12 months being imposed, which would, well, I mean, at the end of that 12-month period, what happens if the works aren't completed? Are you really saying that people can go into those houses, flush the toilets, and obviously it goes nowhere? You know, that's not good planning, and it's not, I'm sure, what members would want to see happen.
Token, I assume their request there is nothing short of a bad joke on their part. But we're not in a position to tell Welsh Water how long their works take or when they even start or anything like that. You can put conditions on the house builders, but not on Welsh Water.
No, I mean, what I would say is Welsh Water have given a programme date, so the assumption is that they know that they're going to get those works done by that time. They don't, you know, you're quite right in what you say about Welsh Water. They're not the easiest utility to deal with, and with planning applications, we have this committee has come a cropper on numerous occasions when they've made objections and withdrawn them at the last minute. Indeed, Primrose Hill is a really good example of that. They objected to that and then, without telling us, entered into negotiations with the developer and almost pulled the rug out from under us on that particular scheme. So, you know, we are aware of how they deal. They deal with these schemes. It is difficult for them. They're often caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, if you like. They're caught between councils and they're caught between developers. That being said, we have a programmed date, which is why it is rare for that to happen, I have to say. They've obviously been seeking funding for these improvement works for a number of years. The way, if I quickly explain the way Welsh Water's funding works, they go to Ofwat with a scheme which they say they need to do. It takes 5 years for Ofwat to agree the funding of that scheme. So they've obviously had this in the pipeline for a number of years. It's finally been programmed within their schedule of works. You can pretty much guarantee it'll be done by the date they say in that condition they've given to us. They wouldn't have given it to us otherwise. And I think, you know, for a house builder to start trying to argue that, well, you know, we don't believe it's going to be done within the 12 months or whatever else, that's a matter they need to take up with Welsh Water, not the council. And I don't think we would be in a position where we would be comfortable, if you like, leaving the residents of those houses going in there without having a way of getting rid of sewerage.
Okay.
One quick clarification point. I know it has been raised, I can't remember who said it, that it's in an area of flood risk or it's in a floodplain. It is not in a floodplain. It is an area which has been identified as possible being land drainage problems. That's a matter for the council, not for Natural Resources Wales. And Natural Resources Wales have made that clear, that they do not raise a flood risk issue on this site.
I don't think you've mentioned conservation area.
Well, okay. The report does go through that in some detail, and I will very quickly deal with it. The conservation area comes almost to the edge of the boundary of this site, although it doesn't quite touch it. There's a slither of land maintained between the conservation area. The conservation area has been considered, and the effect on the conservation area has been considered. This site is actually pretty much can't be seen from the conservation area itself. There are a number of, I call them modern, they're not, I suppose should we all show our age when I say things like that, but they're probably, yes, I think they're probably 60s, 70s and 80s dwellings in the street scene directly, if you like, backing onto where this housing development would be. Those houses are in the conservation area, although clearly they do not add to the conservation area as such. They are similar houses in many ways to what is being proposed in this application. So they will be, the site itself will be pretty much hidden by those houses. They're very close together. They screen the site, if you like. It isn't in the conservation area. It is not considered by your conservation officer that it will actually have a negative impact on the character of the conservation area. There are a number of dwellings identified and buildings identified as having a positive impact on the conservation area. None of those abut this site or relatively close to this site. The key parts of the conservation area are actually down by the church and the areas around there. There are some nice farmhouses on this run and to the south of the road where we're talking about these modernish dwellings backing onto this site. But it is clear that there will be no impact from this development on the conservation area, certainly no negative impact, which is what legislatively what we have to be sure of, that is not going to lead to either a negative impact or at least preserve the character of the conservation area.
Okay.
One final point, if we're talking about visibility, clearly is that as a site, it is within the landscape relatively well screened. It is behind a number of houses, behind the school. And indeed, when you go around the other side of the village, you do view it against the backdrop of built development. That's not to say it won't be prominent, because it's a housing development of 64 houses, but it is a relatively well-sited development in that regard.
Okay. Any other member? Yeah, he did move it, and you're seconding it. Okay. Councillor Ray Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the members for turning up the site visit this morning with the bad weather that it was, and it was good to see that 9 members did turn up for that. The other thing is I'd also like to thank the residents, because they conducted themselves with good respect for the committee and not harassed us, and I think we've got to take that into consideration as well. The one thing I am disappointed still is, you say we should be lucky that we've got this affordable housing in at the money there. It's going elsewhere. Affordable housing is needed in the rural Vale. The villages, as I say, they are dying really, because the residents are getting older and there's no young children seem to follow. All the schools are pretty full, but they're being bussed from other areas. And we do need these, because Fem Gorch is a good, the garden centre there, the 14 houses there already have, there's a list of people, I've seen it already, it's oversubscribed. And I'm sure if you had 35% houses in this site, they would be oversubscribed. And not only the rental, it's the ones with the mortgage as well. They still get those as well, because there's a list of people waiting. And they'd be local. You won't be busting them from other parts of the Vale. They'd be local people from the villages of the rural Vale. And I do feel disappointed that we've not pushed that. And the other thing is, I like to say it's not a NIMBYism. This isn't this objection that the community have got on this, because they did, when it came out in a draft LDP, they put alternative sites in, and they're across the road from the school, and it's for 25 houses, 100% affordable. They realise there's a need for housing, but it's what they, the local people, local knowledge, what they want in the village. And I feel it's a shame we're not supporting them in that. But I must thank everyone for a good debate tonight, and I hope we really do push Welsh Water and make sure there's no, and that we get this drainage and the sewage system right, because there could be one hell of a comeback on us if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Councillor Thomas raises a very good point with regards to the fact that there is some money raised under Section 106 for affordable housing, which could be used elsewhere in the Vale. Councillor Thomas raises a very good point that social housing is required in the rural areas. Could the officer just clarify, could this money actually be used for social housing in the rural areas?
It's earmarked to be used right throughout the Vale, so it could be used anywhere. So, wherever there's greatest needs. But if schemes come forward, absolutely, it could be used there. One of the key issues we've got is that, as you know, developers demand so much for land, and there are exception sites. There's a policy allows for exception sites, and we're due to have a few of these coming through to us, and there are some in pre-planning stage now. There's some that are actually with us at the moment, and in those particular cases, the landowners are willing to accept a lesser contribution for the land on the basis that it'll be either 100% or 80% affordable housing, and the money that would come through the Section 106 agreement would be used by our housing colleagues to fund housing associations to provide houses on those types of sites. So, it is happening. There are a number coming through, We hope there will be more. As more happen, we hope it will. We're a bit. Members may recall in St Mary Church we had a scheme which went through, and it is now. We had a lot of objections to it. It's a marvellous scheme now. I don't know if any of you've been there. Really commend members to go and have a look. An excellent scheme. I did hope we would see more of those coming through after that one which was a success. But we are now starting to see them. So they are happening, and this money here, along with other money which we get from other schemes, will be used just for those sorts of schemes.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Before we take a vote, can I go back to the condition 26, and can you read that back out for people to get it wrote down and know exactly what that extra condition is, please?
I'm just going to sum up some of the changes for all of you. So just so you're aware, there are amendments to condition 2 in terms of the plans, just the details of the plans. Amendments to condition 23, which is, as I read out before, notwithstanding the submitted drainage strategy, no development shall commence on site until a detailed design of the land and surface water drainage system has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and the approved scheme shall be implemented prior to the first beneficial occupation of any of the dwellings and maintained all times thereafter. So that's the new condition 23. Condition 26 is a new condition dealing with the sewage system, and I have adapted it from the late reps to take account of the concerns about the existing Colwinston area. So it will now say, no dwellings hereby approved shall communicate with the public sewage system until either A, the programmed upgrade of Colwinston wastewater treatment works scheduled for completion by 1st of April 2018, and any other necessary improvements to the sewage system in the Colwinston area has been completed and confirmed in writing by the local planning authority, or necessary improvements to the Cowbridge wastewater treatment works to accommodate the foul flows from the development hereby approved, brackets, in accordance with the requirements as outlined in Dŵr Cymru's feasibility study, brackets, reference issued on 14th of June 2014, close brackets, and any other necessary improvements to the sewage system in the Colwinston area have been completed and confirmed in writing by the local planning authority.
So it's subject to those
And one other
conditions.
key change,
Oh, right.
in the terms of the legal agreement, we're removing the reference to dwellings will be sold or occupied. That would not be legal. It's just going to be will be occupied until such time as the solution has been implemented.
Okay. I think it was moved by Councillor Eddie Williams and seconded by John Drysdale. For the officer's recommendation, subject to those changes and conditions. Those members in favour of approval, please show. Sixteen for, and those against. 3 against. Abstentions? None. Thank you. That's clearly carried. On to page 286. This is a site visit that we carried out today. Okay then, thank you. In Love Lane, in Llanblethian. Marcus, would you like to lead us through it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for a new dwelling sited between two existing properties in Love Lane, Llanblethian. It involves the demolition of existing garage on the side of the property and the construction of a new garage and room above on the other side of the property, known as Crookskeen Lawn, Love Lane. As part of the proposals, new access arrangements are proposed, and you'll notice that in the late reps, an amendment to condition number 4 is proposed, which requires a joint access to both dwellings, so a double width access point, so that cars come and go from the site at one point rather than having 2 access points close to the the junction there at Love Lane. It's also required that the hedge be reduced in height to no higher than 0.75 metres to enable visibility from cars coming out of the junction and from obviously cars coming out of the 2 houses that are proposed.
Okay, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the consideration of changing the access. I would support the application and move the application, but I would ask if a condition could be put on to ensure that the Crookskeen Lawn house actually is designed in such a way that you can get in and out in a forward gear. I did have a look this morning. That is practical. and it would certainly make that junction a lot safer. Thank you.
Marcus, I think there was something in...
Yeah, the amended condition does that because the highway officer will have to agree it before it can be released. So that I'm confident that's fine.
Okay. Any other member? Yes, Councillor Penrose. Okay, so Councillor Parker's moved it. Councillor Penrose is seconded. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. Yeah. Right. So we move on to the Grange, St Bride's Super Ely. I think this was subject to a site visit today, and a very muddy one it was too. And this is for the wind turbine. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a single wind turbine, 55 metres to hub, 77 metres to the tip of the blades. The turbine is sited in a fairly remote location. We did walk up to view it, all those councillors that were there. It was a good walk. The associated substation is right next to the turbine. The closest residential properties actually are owned by the farm owner, who's the land the turbine is located upon, approximately 400 metres away to the Grange farmhouse and about 500 metres to Willows Farm, both of which owned by the farm owner. The proposal has been looked at by your environmental health officer and considers there will be no noise impact or shadow flicker impact. Notwithstanding that, conditions have been applied requiring those details to be dealt with if issues do arise in due course with the turbine when it's in operation. There is also a condition dealing with construction management plan, because obviously these are very big pieces of equipment and they've got to get them down country lanes to get them onto that site. So there is a condition dealing with that as well.
Moved by Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Parker, were you moving something or want to speak? Oh, right, okay. Now, before we... did you have a seconder, Councillor Drysdale? Right, okay. Councillor Ray Thomas, then. There we are. Councillor Parker.
No, it was just to say that having walked the site and done my 20 minutes vigorous exercise today,
yes,
I think this site is highly appropriate. I have spoken with the local ward member before, and I would also support the move. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? I'll move straight to a vote then.
I got no comment.
No, right, okay then, yes. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. That's 17 in favour. Those against? Councillor Marnie is against. Any abstentions? I didn't see any. Okay, that's clearly carried. Thank you for that. Coigi Colin Barn in Lancarvan on page 327. Councillor James.
Chairman, to save Marcus going through this, and in the hope that the committee will support, I'm going to move a site visit. I did give Marcus notice of this. The reason that I wanted a site visit is, one, because I think it's recommended refusal because it's not in a settlement, and I wanted to show members how close it is to the outskirts of an existing settlement. And two, and I've supplied plans to Marcus which shows that this is a very, very old barn. And for those grounds, I'd like members to have a look at this application so that we can consider those matters in full when it comes back to us. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members happy for a site visit?
Yeah.
Yes, okay then, that's clearly carried. Site visit is for that, Marcus. Okay then, we're now on page 341. This is land adjacent to Maynell Trehingath.
Well done.
Is my Welsh pretty good? Not bad for a Stoke boy. Okay then, over to you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, it's an application for a single dwelling on the edge of the village of Trehingath, but not within the settlement boundary. Members may recall we've recently refused the dwelling on the edge of the village here, which did go to appeal, but the appellant withdrew the appeal. I think, seeing the writing was on the wall. This site actually has been surrounded by various applications for similar types of development, all of which have been refused. Your officers are recommending refusal on the grounds of its location.
Councillor Parker. Okay then, you got a seconder? Councillor James has shouted up there. All those members in favour of refusal, please show. That is clearly carried. That's unanimous. So, we've got the next one on the list, which is subject to late reps, Marcus, is on page 356. It's the vacant land at the Limes in Cowbridge. Anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got one letter of objection which is reported objecting to the design of the development. This is a site, members from Cowbridge and others members may recall, we've had certain issues here. We are actually prosecuting the owner with respect to the fencing that's around the site at the moment, because it does look particularly unattractive in the middle of the conservation area of the town of Cowbridge. What is proposed is, I have to say, in my opinion, a very unattractive and poor attempt at utilising the site. You will look at the history, and there have been attempts before. Some approved, some refused. This is a particularly bad attempt. It takes as its vernacular, if you like, the 60s block of flats at the Limes Court to the rear as its key for how it intends developing. And I think probably we've all come a long way since the 1960s in terms of design and character. So, yes, this is recommended for refusal, not least because of its detrimental effect on the conservation area, but obviously in terms of the way it's laid out with its sea of car parking in front of the buildings as well. It is a particularly poor example of design.
Councillor Parker, the local member.
Yeah, I couldn't have described it better. It's thoroughly incongruous, totally out of accord with the character of the area, overdevelopment. The only thing I would say is please press on as hard as you can with getting the enforcement notice sorted out, because the fence is actually causing problems. I mean, a complete waste of time putting this application in. If I'm allowed to say that, I will defend that if I need to. Thank you, Chairman.
So you're moving refusal?
I'm moving refusal, support officer's recommendation.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor H.J.W. James. All those members in favour of refusal, please show. And that is unanimous. So thank you for that. The meeting is now closed at 8:10, and thank you for your contribution this evening. 4 hours I've been in this chair.